The sound of running water came from the bathroom. Zhang Wen nimbly unlocked Liao Chongfeng's phone. Checking her husband's background, she was an expert at it, with rich practical experience connecting theory to practice. From call logs to text messages, from social media to shopping platforms, from search engines to self-media, in this big data era, if a person has done shameful things, more or less they would leave traces. Of course, if everything was normal, it didn't mean the person was innocent. It could be that he had a strong awareness against investigation and knew to format himself back to the initial loyal settings every day. Zhang Wen found nothing and complexly put Liao Chongfeng's phone back. She then turned to tidy up Liao Chongfeng's luggage. The bathroom door opened behind her and Liao Chongfeng came out drying his hair. He glanced at Zhang Wen and asked expressionlessly, "What are you doing?" Zhang Wen didn't stop her hands and answered candidly, "Helping you put away your luggage." "Don't want me to touch it?" "Hee, what's going on?" Liao Chongfeng gulped down water, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down sexily. He humped coldly, "What's there that can't be touched?" "Go ahead." Zhang Wen lost her playful mood. She took out the items in the suitcase one by one. She sniffed the clothes, checked the pant pockets, shook out the underwear. Anyway, these things were the same as when he left, except for 2 transport signatures added to the outside of the suitcase. After tidying everything up, family detective Zhang Wen rolled back to the sofa dispiritedly to watch TV. The housewife on TV was going crazy, stirring up the house murkily. She started empathizing with the family, feeling she might have some big illness. As a wife, she seemed very keen on finding evidence of her husband betraying her. Finding it would surely break her heart, but not finding it made her uneasy. She could never figure out why, until now she suddenly understood, because she had always presumed this person would definitely cheat. For no other reason than Liao Chongfeng was too perfect. Liao Chongfeng's parents were both early university students. His mother taught at the university and his father went into business. He grew up in an environment abundant in both material goods and spiritually. His family background was extremely good. And he himself also belonged to the top 5% group: high IQ, good looks, tall stature, high income, high education. Throwing such a man into the bustling world, setting aside his nature, just the external temptations he faced were probably several times more than ordinary people. Just last year at the company party, Zhang Wen attended as a family member. With her right there watching, several crazy girls surrounded Liao Chongfeng, using drunkenness as an excuse to take liberties touching him, leaving Zhang Wen wide-eyed and speechless. Just after getting married, Zhang Wen felt very happy. She thought about how she was just an ordinary girl from an ordinary family, average looks and gentle temperament. Through an arranged marriage she married such an outstanding man, it was extremely good luck. But after giving birth, with her looks and figure declining, life becoming dull and tedious, communication with her husband decreasing, Liao Chongfeng frequently on business trips away, she didn't have this feeling anymore. Facing a husband like this, she started feeling inferior deep down. She experienced a sense of crisis, she felt a little tired. Tired from worrying the marriage would change, and tired from chagrining over herself being so vulgar. She was also doted on by her parents since she was little, raised with independent, strong, dignified values. The edification she received didn't allow her to become this kind of vulgar woman, but she couldn't help doing so. Paying attention to the slightest changes with her husband, guessing everything he experienced outside, imagining who he might meet. She was extremely humble, even giving up herself somewhat. She knew this wasn't good, but she couldn't help it. She liked Liao Chongfeng. Who wouldn't like nice things? Wanting to grab something nice and keep it to yourself was human nature. There were many men who could make her a carefree woman, and even men who got nervous over her. But she just liked men who she had to look up to. Tired, yet happily so. Of course, Zhang Wen also knew relying solely on vigilance wouldn't maintain the stability of the marriage. She needed to enhance her own attractiveness, she had to think of something from her side. Zhang Wen started getting cosmetic procedures, losing weight, shaping her body, paying attention to dressing up. She went through a lot of suffering. It was wishful thinking to look as young as before, but at least her image improved a lot. The young colleagues at her company called her fashionable big sister. She dazzled around in front of Liao Chongfeng like this every day, but frustratingly, it didn't have any effect. Liao Chongfeng still had that same cold expression all day. Zhang Wen felt somewhat defeated. She was certain Liao Chongfeng had someone outside. Zhang Wen calmed down and thought it over. Liao Chongfeng was absolutely a workaholic. If he was cheating, the possibility of it being a colleague or client was very high. Zhang Wen increasingly felt she needed to go to Liao Chongfeng's company and raise her presence, and investigate who was suspicious. That day, Zhang Wen took a day off and cooked a pot of pork bone soup at home. She went to Liao Chongfeng's company right at lunchtime. Seeing her, Liao Chongfeng didn't have much reaction. He raised his wrist to check his watch and said, "I'm about to have a meeting, take the soup to the office. I'll drink it after the meeting." Zhang Wen carried the thermos into Liao Chongfeng's office. This company was founded by Liao Chongfeng and a childhood friend. The scale wasn't big, but the business was steadily growing. Liao Chongfeng practically lived at the company. In this less than 30 square meters messy office, traces of Liao Chongfeng's personal items were everywhere. A thought popped into Zhang Wen's mind. Perhaps Liao Chongfeng's office hid another unknown side of him. The boss's wife lingering in the boss's office, naturally no one dared object. Zhang Wen pretended not to see the inquiring looks from the employees. She pulled down the blinds, and began rummaging through boxes and cabinets under the pretense of tidying up. Unfortunately, after searching for a long time, all she could find were some irrelevant financial statements and invoices. Just as Zhang Wen was about to retreat, she noticed a small cabinet in the corner with a large potted green vine placed on top. The lush branches and leaves hung down, covering most of the cabinet. Zhang Wen pulled open the cabinet drawer and flipped through materials for domestic and foreign schools. Zhang Wen felt a little comforted. Liao Chongfeng was decent at least, making time in his busy schedule to worry about their child's education. Further below were a bunch of physical exam reports. Zhang Wen flipped through them and saw Liao Chongfeng's metrics were all normal. Zhang Wen found nothing. She took out all the reports she had messed up, wanting to neatly stack them and put them back. Just then, a piece of paper completely different from the exam reports fell out. It was a diagnosis report from a public hospital, clipped between the physical exam reports. Zhang Wen stared at the metrics on the report, as if struck by lightning. Erection start time, end time, frequency, blood volume, glans hardness, shaft hardness. She recognized all these words, but together they didn't make sense to her. She knew what she was resisting, but still couldn't help reading the conclusion: erectile dysfunction likely, recommend further treatment. What? Her elegant, graceful husband turned out to be impotent? Zhang Wen was greatly shocked. Her heart was chaotic. She read and reread the report, but her mood still did not settle down after putting it back. She sat in the chair feeling helpless, not knowing what to do next. In that moment of confusion, she suddenly thought of something. She hurriedly took the lid off the thermos, thinking maybe next time she should cook oxtail soup, add more wolfberries. She anxiously put the lid back on the thermos, unable to stop the corners of her mouth twitching into a smile. She felt so strange. Upon finding out her husband had ED, she was not very sad. She did not worry about her sex life in the future. On the contrary, she thought, even the most awesome man can't escape ED, her heart filling with tolerance, care and understanding, like a saint. Zhang Wen didn't figure out how to deal with this, but one thing was certain: her husband knowing she knew about his ED would be a greater blow to him than his ED was to her. So before Liao Chongfeng came back, she fled first. After getting home, Zhang Wen's mood still did not calm down. Counting on her fingers, it really had been a long time since they were intimate as a couple. In fact, she was indifferent about it. After all, women were different from men. Compared to sex, she preferred hugging and kissing more. Small toys were much more useful than men. She had always thought they were like brothers sleeping in bunk beds, because Liao Chongfeng was too busy, too tired, under too much stress, and didn't have the mood. After all, who could associate such a mighty, vigorous man with ED? Now that she knew the truth, what should she do from now on? Looking at the report date, Liao Chongfeng had ED for a long time already, but he never mentioned it. Maybe he even secretly got treatment. As such an excellent, perfect man in others' eyes, how could he endure the blow dealt by ED? Work stress was already high, plus having to bear psychological pressure that couldn't be spoken about. Thinking of this, Zhang Wen felt pity. But then recalling his arrogant, cold president manner, usually, the subtitle, "Strong outside, weak inside," floated past Zhang Wen's eyes. To maintain his image, a man's struggle was also quite impressive. She felt a little heartless finding it funny. Oh no, he wouldn't desperately go to those small clinic doctors on the street, right? He should not, he just had ED, his brain wasn't broken. In her heart, Zhang Wen opened a small theater, arranging many storylines for Liao Chongfeng. Finally, she cleared her throat, restrained her smile, reined in her imagination. As a wife, she still should accompany Liao Chongfeng to face it all. So the first step now was to discover Liao Chongfeng's condition naturally, to get him to open his heart, expose his vulnerability, no longer bearing unnecessary psychological pressure from having to conceal this. After 9 p.m., Liao Chongfeng came home, worn down after a day of work torment. Zhang Wen gently went to welcome him, smiling and asking, "Have you eaten dinner?" Liao Chongfeng undid his tie with one hand, and murmured yes. Zhang Wen said, "I cooked soup, have some more." Liao Chongfeng, "Why make soup again? Didn't you just have some at lunch?" Zhang Wen, "That was pork bone soup, this time it's oxtail soup. You're too tired, you need to nourish yourself well." Hearing the word oxtail, Liao Chongfeng visibly froze for a moment. Before he could investigate further, Zhang Wen had already floated back to the kitchen. Zhang Wen made Liao Chongfeng drink 2 bowls of the soup. When it was time for bed, Zhang Wen quietly changed into sexy sleepwear. She waited in bed until almost falling asleep, but Liao Chongfeng still didn't come into the room. Zhang Wen went out and saw that he was working overtime in the study as expected. Usually she would let it go and sleep by herself. But today she had a mission to complete. Thinking of that mission, she slapped her cheeks, took a deep breath, and went into the study with a reckless attitude. Before Liao Chongfeng could react, she directly straddled his lap. Liao Chongfeng tensed up like a good innocent boy. He pushed Zhang Wen away with both hands and asked, "What are you doing?" Zhang Wen said, "I feel you're too tired, hurry to the bedroom and rest." She started getting restless, groping him like a pervert. Liao Chongfeng couldn't escape, just kept sighing. After struggling for over 20 minutes, Zhang Wen had no more acting skills to demonstrate. She went straight to the point, "How come you're not reacting? We haven't done it for so long, this isn't normal. Could it be you have someone outside?" The disheveled Liao Chongfeng uncharacteristically let go of his dominance. Stuttering, "Don't talk nonsense, I'm probably just too tired." "Zhang Wen, let's go to the hospital tomorrow, I'll make an appointment with the doctor. Early detection, early treatment." Liao Chongfeng had some trouble accepting Zhang Wen's tone of discussing a major incurable illness. He turned his head away, "I've been." Zhang Wen uttered "oh," and didn't say more, waiting for Liao Chongfeng to continue. Liao Chongfeng lightly coughed twice, "I've gotten the necessary checks done. Don't know why, could be psychological." Zhang Wen looked grieved, "I'm inadequate enough to make you impotent? Can you masturbate at least? Or try someone else?" Liao Chongfeng had an incredulous expression, "Can you not speak recklessly?" He slumped down again, waving his right hand, and said softly, "That doesn't work either." Zhang Wen took her leg off Liao Chongfeng, looking down at him from above. She comforted, "It's fine, since there's illness we'll treat it. Even if it can't be cured, it's no big deal. Old couples, with the kid in middle school already, those things aren't important." Liao Chongfeng looked up at her. After quite a while he squeezed out a, "Thank you." Now that it was exposed, Zhang Wen rightly took part in Liao Chongfeng's treatment. Liao Chongfeng was flying high in his career, while little Liao Chongfeng had completely collapsed. Sometimes Zhang Wen would think, could the law of conservation of energy be exerting an obscure effect? Liao Chongfeng's masculine vigor had not disappeared, it had just transferred from his body to his career. Because of ED, even the most awesome man would feel inferior, and Liao Chongfeng was no exception. From then on, Liao Chongfeng softened a lot in front of Zhang Wen, even more than down there. He no longer had that cold face, and was no longer taciturn. The quiet family life amplified the awkwardness brought by ED, so he started talking more, chatting with Zhang Wen about things at work, office gossip, client scandals. There was a barely detectable fawning in the conversation. Zhang Wen understood, because now she and him were partners in this battle, and his masculine pride was in her thoughts sometimes. Zhang Wen accompanied Liao Chongfeng to see psychologists, traditional Chinese medicine doctors, and try some folk remedies. They spent a lot of money, yet he was like cursed, his ED showed no signs of improving. Liao Chongfeng was very discouraged. Zhang Wen comforted him every way she could, babbling nonsense, "It's okay dear, think of it this way. A person can't be too perfect, can't have everything. If God had to take something from you, isn't having ED much better than other illnesses? Taking your sexual function instead of your career, parents, children, isn't that much better?" Liao Chongfeng looked at her with complicated feelings. You're pretty good at comforting people. Zhang Wen smiled, I'm just telling the truth. Don't put so much psychological pressure on yourself. Liao Chongfeng didn't say more. Zhang Wen knew in her heart, no matter how well she spoke, no man could accept having ED. But if you can't accept it, what else can you do? Later Zhang Wen stopped taking Liao Chongfeng to see doctors, and also stopped the folk remedies, because they truly had no effect. Since it was so, might as well just forget about the issue altogether. She changed her thinking, dragging Liao Chongfeng to go jogging and hiking. Through this process, they had more topics to talk about, becoming more intimate. Of course with Liao Chongfeng's ED, no matter how intimate they couldn't reach fiery passion. But Zhang Wen felt it didn't matter. She never cared much about that sort of thing anyway. The ED brought Liao Chongfeng distress, but resolved Zhang Wen's worries. Thinking back on her former self, carefully checking for evidence, she even had to deliberately restrain the small joy filling her heart now. How could a woman feel happy about her husband's ED? Was she crazy? She wasn't crazy, she truly felt happy. Because of the ED, it was basically impossible for Liao Chongfeng to cheat. Because of the ED, Liao Chongfeng felt guilty and paid more attention to her feelings. Because of the ED, they now shared a secret, becoming brand new partners. Because of the ED they could chat about everyday life, like real old married couples. So Zhang Wen felt Liao Chongfeng's ED untreated was pretty good too. Their son was now independent. Her husband was handsome, rich yet impotent. She didn't need to worry about Liao Chongfeng cheating, or pleasing Liao Chongfeng. Her life and marriage had truly reached the best point. She was extremely satisfied with her current life, even worried she might laugh out loud in dreams. She was extremely grateful for the one flawed corner appearing in her marriage, letting her heart find its place. She no longer had to question why she got such a perfect man, because this man was no longer perfect now. He would also feel inferior like her. It was as if they were made for each other. For the rest of their lives, let them walk hand in hand as partners within the framework of a beautiful marriage, like brother and sister.